He thought he was untouchable. Marcus Thorne sat in his corner office on the 12th floor of Aldridge Technologies, popping open a bottle of Dom Perignon with the woman who wasn't his wife. The champagne fizzed as he filled two crystal flutes, the sound of celebration filling the space between them. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, San Francisco's financial district stretched below like a kingdom he'd built with his own hands. Inside, Vivian Ashford draped herself across his mahogany desk, her heels kicked off onto the Persian rug, laughing that tinkling glass laugh that used to make his pulse race. At 2:15 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, Marcus believed he had it all figured out. His pregnant wife, Catherine, was at home in their Pacific Heights penthouse, probably knitting booties or reading pregnancy books, blissfully unaware. The IPO was 3 months away. The board trusted him. The investors loved him. And this woman, 24 and radiant, made him feel like the titan of industry everyone believed him to be. He raised his glass toward Vivian, grinning. Just 3 more months. When the IPO closes, she'll be a minority shareholder. The company will be mine. Vivian traced the rim of her flute with one manicured finger. But I thought Catherine founded Aldridge Technologies. Everyone says her father built it from nothing. Marcus took a long sip, savoring the vintage. Founded it with inherited money, sure. Her dad was brilliant, I'll give him that. But who's been running operations for the past 5 years? Who has the relationships with Goldman Sachs? Who restructured the entire business model after Robert Aldridge died? Me. Catherine's smart with code, I'll give her that. But she doesn't understand the game. She's too soft for this world. Vivian sat up slightly, a shadow of doubt crossing her face. She doesn't know about us, does she? Marcus set down his glass and moved toward her, confidence radiating from every step. Catherine doesn't know anything. She trusts me completely. It's almost boring how easy it is. This morning I told her I had meetings with the Goldman team all afternoon. She smiled, kissed me goodbye, went back to her herbal tea. The woman is 7 months pregnant and thinks I'm working late for our future. The intercom on his desk buzzed, a harsh sound that cut through the intimate atmosphere. Marcus sighed, pressing the button with more force than necessary. Eleanor, I specifically said no interruptions. I'm in a high-level strategy session. Eleanor Frost's voice crackled through, strained in a way that should have warned him. I apologize, Mr. Thorne. There's a situation that requires your immediate attention. Marcus exchanged a glance with Vivienne, rolling his eyes. What situation? Mrs. Aldridge is here. She's on her way up. The champagne glass nearly slipped from his fingers. What? She's supposed to be at home. Tell her I'm in a meeting. I'll call her tonight. The door opened. Not a knock, not a courtesy pause, just open. Catherine Aldridge stood in the doorway, 7 months pregnant in a navy blue maternity dress that somehow made her look more powerful rather than vulnerable. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek bun. Her grandmother's pearls hung at her throat. She looked nothing like the soft, accommodating wife who'd kissed him goodbye that morning. She looked like the CEO she'd always been, the one he'd spent 5 years convincing everyone, including her, didn't exist. Her eyes moved from Marcus to Vivian, to the champagne and back to Marcus. No tears, no hysteria, just cold assessment. Hello, Marcus. Hello, Vivian. Vivian scrambled off the desk, grabbing for her shoes, her face draining of color. Mrs. Aldridge, I can explain, this isn't... Catherine held up one hand, silencing her. Save it. I'm not here to have a conversation with the girl my husband's been sleeping with for the past 8 months. I have lawyers for that. Marcus found his voice, forcing it into the authoritative tone that usually commanded boardrooms. Catherine, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be resting. The baby... Our baby is fine, Marcus. She kicked me this morning at 6 a.m., right when you were sneaking out to text Vivian about your Napa weekend plans. Catherine walked further into the office, her movements deliberate despite her pregnancy. She set a manila folder on his desk. This is your copy of the divorce petition. It's already been filed. Process server attempted delivery to the house, but since you've been avoiding going home, I decided to deliver it personally. Marcus stared at the folder like it might explode. Divorce? You can't be serious. Honey, if this is about... Catherine placed a second folder next to the first, this one significantly thicker. And this is your termination notice. Effective immediately. You're fired, Marcus. The room tilted. Vivian made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. Marcus gripped the edge of his desk, champagne sloshing in his glass. Fired? I'm the CFO of this company. You can't fire me. Catherine's expression didn't change. I'm the majority shareholder of this company, Marcus. I own 67% of Aldridge Technologies. My father left me controlling interest when he died 6 years ago. You seem to have forgotten that. I don't need your permission to terminate you. I don't need board approval. I need you to collect your personal items and leave this building within the next 10 minutes. Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead. This is insane. You're emotional. You're pregnant. Your hormones. Catherine opened the thick folder, pulling out a sheaf of papers. I have 8 months of documented evidence that you've been violating your non-disclosure agreement, leaking trade secrets to Titanium Technologies through intermediaries, and embezzling research and development funds. She turned a page. You've been sharing our proprietary AI algorithms, client lists, pricing structures, and security vulnerabilities with Dalton Pierce, their VP of Strategy. In exchange, you've received $180,000 in kickbacks, laundered through an offshore LLC in the Cayman Islands. The color drained from Marcus's face. That's not... I never... Where did you... Catherine continued as if he hadn't spoken. The plan was elegant, I'll give you that. Titanium would use our leaked information to undercut us in the market. Our stock price would plummet right before the IPO. Titanium would then offer a rescue merger at a depressed valuation. You'd position yourself as the hero who saved the company by agreeing to the deal. You'd become CEO of the merged entity, and I'd be pushed out as founder emeritus, powerless to stop you from dismantling everything my father built. Vivian had backed herself against the wall, her hand over her mouth. Marcus's mind raced, trying to find an angle, an explanation, anything. Catherine, listen to me. Catherine's hand moved to rest on her swollen belly, a gesture so protective it made something twist in Marcus's chest. I've been listening to you for 5 years, Marcus. I listened when you said I should step back from public events because the press preferred a male CEO. I listened when you said I should focus on product development and let you handle the business side. I listened when you said I should stay home during my pregnancy because stress was bad for the company's reputation. I'm done listening. She turned toward the door where 2 security guards had appeared, along with Eleanor Frost, whose face was carefully neutral. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. Your corporate laptop, phone, and access cards will remain here. You have 10 minutes. Marcus stood, his legs shaky, adrenaline replacing the champagne warmth. You can't do this. I'll sue for wrongful termination. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them how unstable you are, how you're making emotional decisions. Catherine met his eyes, and there was something in her gaze he'd never seen before. Not the soft woman who'd edited his graduate school papers. Not the grieving daughter who'd let him take control after her father died. This was someone else entirely. Someone who'd been there all along, just waiting. Griffin Carlisle from Morrison & Carlisle is filing a criminal complaint with the FBI as we speak. Trade secret theft is a federal crime, Marcus. You're looking at 10 years in prison and a $5 million fine. You won't have time to sue anyone. You'll be too busy with your criminal defense attorney. The words hit him like physical blows. FBI, criminal, prison. The walls of his corner office, his kingdom, suddenly felt like they were closing in. Vivian found her voice, small and trembling. Marcus, what is she talking about? You said you were helping me with my business consultant, that Dalton was just... Catherine turned to look at Vivian for the first time with something other than ice. Ms. Ashford, I suggest you call a lawyer. The messages you forwarded to Dalton Pierce on Marcus's behalf constitute material involvement in corporate espionage. Unless you cooperate with the investigation, you'll be charged as an accomplice. Vivian burst into tears, grabbing her purse and fleeing past the security guards. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, growing fainter until a distant door slammed. Marcus stood alone, the champagne bottle sweating condensation onto his desk, the life he'd built crumbling around him. Catherine, please, think about our baby. Think about our marriage. I made mistakes, I know, but we can work through this. I'll go to counseling. I'll fix things. Catherine's expression didn't soften. You could have been a partner, Marcus. You could have been a father. You chose to be a thief. She paused at the doorway, one hand on the frame. Goodbye, Marcus. The door closed with a soft click that sounded louder than any slam. 8 months earlier, Catherine Aldridge had woken up in their Pacific Heights penthouse to January sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread below like a promise, the bay glittering in the distance. She was 6 weeks pregnant, though she hadn't told Marcus yet. She'd been waiting for the right moment, imagining his face when she showed him the test, the way he'd pick her up and spin her around like he used to when they first fell in love. The bathroom test sat in her purse, wrapped in tissue paper. Tonight at dinner, she'd decided, she'd make his favorite meal, open the good wine for him, sparkling water for her, and then she'd tell him. They'd toast to their future, their family, the baby who would inherit everything Robert Aldridge had built. Marcus rushed through the bedroom, already on his phone, barking orders at someone on the other end. His tie hung loose around his neck. His hair was damp from the shower. He smelled like expensive cologne and ambition. Catherine set down her herbal tea, trying to catch his attention. Marcus, do you have a few minutes? I wanted to talk to you about something important. He grabbed his suit jacket from the chair, still talking into his phone. Postpone the Tokyo call to 3 p.m. Pacific. I don't care what time it is there, they'll take the meeting. He covered the phone with his palm, glancing at Catherine. Can it wait until tonight, babe? Goldman Sachs reps are coming to the office today. This IPO is critical. We're talking about timing, valuation, the whole 9 yards. Catherine felt the words stick in her throat. I know, it's just... Marcus kissed the top of her head, already moving toward the door. You're the best, Cat. Don't wait up if I'm late. These things always run long. He was gone before she could finish her sentence, the heavy oak door closing behind him with the finality of a vault. Catherine stood in the kitchen, hand drifting to her still flat stomach. The silence rushed back in, filling the spaces Marcus left behind. She looked around their penthouse, white marble countertops, imported Italian furniture, modern art that cost more than most people's cars. Everything gleamed. Nothing felt like home. She walked to the hallway closet, reaching for her coat. Her hand brushed against Marcus's spare jacket, the gray Hugo Boss he'd worn 2 days ago. She lifted it to hang it properly, and something fell from the pocket, a crumpled receipt from Cartier. $12,300 for a diamond bracelet. Catherine's heart did a strange little flip. She checked her jewelry box later that morning, opening each velvet compartment. No new bracelet. She checked her birthday, still 4 months away. Their anniversary, 7 months past. She sat on the edge of their bed, the receipt in her hand, and felt the first crack in the foundation of her marriage. By late afternoon, she'd convinced herself it was for a client. Marcus often bought gifts for the wives of important investors. It was strategic, professional, nothing to worry about. But when she opened her laptop to work on code revisions for their security algorithm, she noticed Marcus's personal computer was still on the desk. He'd taken his work laptop, but left this one behind. Catherine stared at it for a long time. She'd never violated his privacy. They trusted each other. That was the foundation of everything. But her hand moved almost of its own accord, lifting the screen. It woke without needing a password. He'd left it unlocked. The email browser was open. At the top of his inbox was a thread with a name Catherine didn't recognize. Vivian Ashford. The subject line was empty. The preview text made her stomach drop. Baby, I can't wait for the Napa trip this weekend. The suite at Meadowood is ready. Bring that wine you promised. V. Catherine clicked. The thread unspooled like a nightmare in reverse. Months of messages, dozens of them, intimate, casual, the language of two people who knew each other's bodies as well as their schedules. References to hotels she'd never been to, restaurants where Marcus claimed to have business dinners, weekends he'd said were investor retreats. She scrolled faster, looking for the beginning, trying to find where her marriage had ended without her noticing. October, September, August. 8 months of another woman woven through her husband's life. But it was worse than that, far worse. Embedded in the flirtatious messages were attachments, business documents, spreadsheets with client data, product roadmaps she'd personally designed, security vulnerability reports that weren't supposed to leave the building, and Vivian's replies, brief, almost thoughtless, forwarding everything to an email address at Titanium Technologies. Catherine's hands started shaking. She opened a new browser window, typed Vivian Ashford into the search bar. An Instagram profile loaded, public, filled with carefully curated photos. Vivian at wine tastings. Vivian in designer clothes. Vivian at the Ritz-Carlton Half Moon Bay, the same weekend Marcus had claimed to be in Los Angeles for meetings. In the background of one photo, barely visible, was a man's hand. On the wrist was a watch Catherine had given Marcus for his 35th birthday, a limited edition Patek Philippe. She ran to the bathroom and vomited. The baby, their baby, somersaulted inside her as if sensing her distress. Catherine gripped the edge of the sink, staring at her reflection. Pale, shocked, already showing faint dark circles under her eyes from morning sickness and late nights reviewing code. When had she become invisible? When had Marcus stopped seeing her as a partner and started seeing her as an obstacle? The answer came with brutal clarity the day her father died and left her 67% of Aldridge Technologies. Marcus had proposed 3 months later. She'd thought it was love. He'd been her rock through her grief, handling the business details while she mourned. But he hadn't been supporting her. He'd been positioning himself, and she'd been too heartbroken to see it. Catherine straightened, wiping her mouth, forcing herself to breathe. She couldn't confront him, not yet. If she did, he'd delete everything. He'd spin some story. He'd make her doubt what she'd seen with her own eyes. She needed more than emails. She needed proof that would stand up in court. Proof that would protect her company and her child. She picked up her phone and searched for corporate investigation firms in the Bay Area. She needed someone discreet, someone who understood both infidelity and white-collar crime, someone who wouldn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. The top result was Beckett Strand Investigations, based in Oakland. The website was minimal, no flashy graphics, just a bio and contact information. Beckett Strand, former FBI Cybercrimes Division, 20 years of experience in corporate espionage and financial fraud. Consultation by appointment only. Catherine booked a meeting for the next morning. She chose a coffee shop in Oakland, far from the gleaming towers of San Francisco's financial district, where someone might recognize her. She told Marcus she had a doctor's appointment for the baby. He barely looked up from his phone when she said it. Beckett Strand was not what she expected. 55, graying at the temples, with the quiet intensity of someone who'd seen the worst of human nature and stopped being surprised by it. He sat across from her in the back corner of the cafe, a black coffee in front of him, and listened without interrupting as she explained what she'd found. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Miss Aldridge, what exactly do you want from this investigation?" Catherine met his eyes. "I want to know if my husband is having an affair, And I want to know if he's committing corporate espionage. And if he is, I want enough evidence to destroy him legally before he destroys everything my father built." Beckett's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his gaze. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Most people who come to me want to save their marriage or quietly divorce. You're talking about building a criminal case. Catherine placed both hands on her stomach, feeling the flutter of life inside her. My father spent 30 years building Aldridge Technologies from nothing. When he died, Marcus helped me restructure and expand. I thought we were partners. I thought we were building something together. But if he's stealing from my company to give our competitors an advantage, if he's using me as a placeholder while he maneuvers to take control, then he's not my husband. He's a criminal who happens to share my bed. Beckett nodded slowly. This won't be cheap, and it won't be fast. If you want evidence that will hold up under legal scrutiny, we're talking months of surveillance, forensic accounting, digital investigation. You'll need to act normal around him the entire time. Can you do that? Catherine thought about the pregnancy test still wrapped in tissue paper in her purse. She thought about all the nights she'd waited for Marcus to come home, believing his excuses. She thought about her father's face the last time she'd seen him alive, proud and trusting, telling her that Marcus was a good man who would help her take the company to new heights. I can do whatever it takes. Beckett pulled out a contract. Then let's get started. Over the next 3 months, Catherine learned to be an actress in her own life. She smiled when Marcus came home late. She nodded sympathetically when he complained about difficult investors. She attended exactly 0 company events, just as he'd suggested, staying home to rest and prepare for the baby. She was the perfect, trusting, pregnant wife. And every week, Beckett sent her reports that shattered her heart into smaller and smaller pieces. Marcus and Vivian at Ventana Big Sur charged to the corporate card, $3,000 for a weekend retreat. Marcus had told Catherine he was at a tech conference in Seattle. Marcus and Vivian at a private wine tasting in Napa. The sommelier had called Marcus Mr. Ashford, assuming Vivian was his wife. Marcus hadn't corrected him. Vivian's $8,500 a month apartment in Nob Hill, lease signed by an LLC that Marcus controlled. The Porsche 911 in the building's garage, also leased through the same LLC. The jewelry, Cartier, Tiffany, Harry Winston, all charged to Aldridge Technologies' corporate accounts under vague descriptions like client entertainment and business development. But the affair, devastating as it was, paled beside the corporate crimes. Beckett's team tracked every document Vivian forwarded to Dalton Pierce at Titanium Technologies. The AI algorithm that Catherine had personally coded, worth $50 million in research and development. Client acquisition costs and pricing strategies that gave Titanium an unfair competitive advantage. Security vulnerabilities in their encryption software that, in the wrong hands, could compromise their entire client base. The forensic accountant Beckett brought in found the money trail. $180,000 in wire transfers from an offshore LLC registered to Dalton Pierce, routed through 3 shell companies, eventually landing in an account Marcus controlled. Kickbacks, payment for industrial espionage. And then the investigator uncovered the hostile takeover plan. Emails between Marcus and Dalton, carefully encrypted, but not carefully enough. The strategy laid out in clinical detail, leak enough information to damage Aldridge Technologies' market position. Time it with the IPO announcement to maximize stock volatility. Have Titanium offer a rescue merger when Catherine's board panicked. Position Marcus as the steady hand who could navigate the crisis. Merge the companies with Marcus as CEO. Push Catherine into a powerless advisory role. Founder emeritus, respected but irrelevant. Catherine read the emails at 3 in the morning, sitting in the nursery she'd been slowly decorating. The crib was half assembled. Soft yellow paint covered the walls. She didn't want to know the baby's sex yet, wanted some part of this experience to be innocent and surprising. Her hands shook so hard she had to set down her tablet. Marcus was in their bed 30 feet away, sleeping soundly. She could hear his breathing, even and unbothered. How many nights had she lain awake, worrying about the company, about their future, about whether she was making the right decisions as CEO? And all that time he'd been sleeping peacefully, secure in his betrayal. The baby kicked, a sharp jab against her ribs. Catherine placed her hand over the spot, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry your father is a monster. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. But I promise you, I will fix this. I will protect you and everything your grandfather built. I promise." She called Beckett the next morning from a bathroom at a coffee shop, voice low and steady. "I need a lawyer, not a divorce attorney, someone who specializes in corporate warfare and criminal prosecution." Beckett didn't hesitate. Griffin Carlisle. Used to be a prosecutor, now does plaintiff-side corporate litigation. He's expensive, but he's the best. Set up a meeting. Catherine met Griffin in his downtown San Francisco office 3 days later. 40th floor, views of the bay, walls lined with case victories and legal awards. Griffin Carlisle was 58, silver-haired, with a kind of sharp intelligence that made her feel like he was reading 5 moves ahead of whatever she said. He reviewed Beckett's evidence over 2 hours, his expression growing darker. "Mrs. Aldridge, this isn't just a divorce case. This is RICO-level corporate crime. Trade secret theft alone carries a 10-year federal prison sentence. Add in the wire fraud from the offshore accounts, and your husband is looking at serious time." "Good." Griffin looked up, meeting her eyes. "Most people in your position want to minimize scandal, protect the company's reputation. You're talking about prosecuting the CFO of your own company 3 months before your IPO. Catherine leaned back in her chair, one hand on her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant now, uncomfortable in every position, but refusing to show weakness. "My prenuptial agreement has an infidelity clause. If Marcus is proven unfaithful, I keep all marital assets and his controlling shares in the company go into a trust for our children. But that's not enough. If I just divorce him quietly, he'll fight me for custody. He'll use his money and connections to drag me through years of litigation. He'll leak information about the company to damage the IPO out of spite. The only way to win against someone like Marcus is to remove every weapon he has. His money, his reputation, his freedom, if it comes to that." Griffin allowed himself a small smile. "Then we need to coordinate carefully. Divorce filing and termination happen simultaneously. Asset freeze through court order. FBI complaint filed the same day. Press release that controls the narrative. CFO terminated for cause. Company cooperating with federal investigation. Time it perfectly so he can't move money or destroy evidence." "When?" Griffin looked at his calendar. "He's expecting the IPO in February. File in mid-November. Give you time to deliver the baby and recover before everything explodes. Hit him when he thinks he's won." Catherine shook her head. "No, November 14th, before the baby comes. I need to do this while I'm still strong enough to fight. After she's born, I'll be vulnerable. I won't risk him using our daughter as leverage." Griffin studied her for a long moment. "You're certain?" She thought about her father's face, about the company he'd built from nothing, about the daughter growing inside her who deserved better than a criminal for a father, about the years she'd spent making herself smaller so Marcus could feel bigger. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The plan came together over the next 6 weeks. Eleanor Frost, Marcus's executive assistant of 15 years, became Catherine's inside source. The recruitment happened over lunch at a French restaurant, far from the financial district. "Eleanor," Catherine said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Does Marcus treat you well?" Eleanor's carefully neutral expression flickered. "Mrs. Aldridge, I'm not sure what you mean." Catherine pulled out her phone, showing a photo of Marcus and Vivian at Meadowood. "I know about the affair. I've known for months. I'm not asking you to betray Marcus's personal life. I'm asking whether he treats his employees with respect. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, her hands folded in her lap. The truth unfurled slowly, like a flower that had been closed too long. He used to. When your father was alive, when the company was smaller, Marcus was different. He was hungry, but he was fair. But in the last 2 years, since the company started growing rapidly, he's become, she searched for the word, entitled. He snaps at assistants. He takes credit for other people's work. Last month, he yelled at me for scheduling a call during his gym time. Your father never would have done that. Catherine leaned forward. I think Marcus is committing corporate espionage. I think he's stealing from the company to enrich himself and position a hostile takeover. I have evidence. But I need to know if he's been behaving strangely, secretive, unusual requests. Eleanor's eyes widened, but she didn't look shocked. She looked like someone who'd been waiting for confirmation of something she'd suspected. He's been printing confidential reports late at night, documents that should be logged in the system but aren't. He's been taking meetings with people who aren't on his calendar. A man named Dalton Pierce has called the office 3 times in the last month, and Marcus always takes the call in private. Catherine felt the pieces clicking into place. Eleanor, I'm going to file for divorce and terminate Marcus in mid-November. I need your help to make sure he can't destroy evidence or move assets before that happens. In exchange, I'll provide you with full legal immunity, a severance package, and a letter of recommendation. You can retire if you want, or work for Aldridge Technologies under new leadership, but I need you to trust me. Eleanor didn't hesitate. Your father gave me a job when I was a single mother with no degree. He paid for my son's college education. I've been loyal to Aldridge Technologies for 20 years, Mrs. Aldridge, not to Marcus Thorne. Tell me what you need. By October, Catherine had an army. Beckett's investigators tracking Marcus's every move. Griffin building an airtight legal case. Eleanor duplicating files and monitoring communications. A forensic accounting team from one of the Big Four firms tracing every suspicious transaction. And Catherine herself, 7 months pregnant, pretending she didn't know her marriage was already over. The hardest part was living the lie. Marcus came home most nights now, Vivian apparently getting clingy, demanding too much of his time when he needed to focus on the IPO. He'd sit across from Catherine at dinner, talking about his day, about the Goldman Sachs presentations, about the future they'd build together after the baby came. She'd smile and nod, asking the right questions, playing the supportive wife. Inside, she was counting down. 23 days, 15 days, 8 days. On November 13th, the night before execution, Marcus noticed her nursery project. He stood in the doorway, watching her assemble the crib with an instruction manual spread across the floor. Her belly made it difficult to bend, but she was determined. He actually smiled, something genuine in it for the first time in months. You need help with that, babe? Catherine looked up, screwdriver in hand. I've got it, just a few more pieces. He stepped into the room, picking up a section of the crib frame. Let me, you shouldn't be straining yourself. They worked in silence for a while, the domestic intimacy almost painful. This could have been real, Catherine thought. We could have had this life together if you hadn't chosen to destroy it. When the crib was assembled, Marcus stepped back to admire it. Looks good. She's going to love it. Catherine's throat tightened. You don't even know if it's a girl. Marcus blinked. Don't I? I thought you told me. I told you 3 months ago, Marcus. You were on your phone. You said congratulations and went back to your email. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I'm sorry. Things have been crazy with the IPO. But after February, when everything settles, I'll be more present. I promise. Catherine stood, one hand on the crib rail. We both know that's not true. He frowned. What do you mean? She met his eyes, letting herself be honest for just this moment. You've been absent for years, Marcus. Not just with me, with the company, with yourself. You've become someone I don't recognize. Marcus moved toward her, hands reaching for her shoulders. Catherine, where is this coming from? Are you scared about the birth? Because we're going to be fine. We're going to be a family. Catherine stepped back, his hands falling away. Tomorrow, she said quietly, tomorrow I'll tell you what I really think. She left him standing in the nursery, confused and uneasy, and locked herself in the guest bathroom. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, hands over her face, and let herself cry. Not for Marcus, not for their marriage, but for the daughter who would never know her father as anything but a cautionary tale, for the life they might have had if he'd chosen differently, for the last shred of hope she'd been carrying that maybe, somehow, she'd been wrong about all of it. The baby kicked hard, as if to remind her why she was doing this. Catherine wiped her eyes, stood, looked at herself in the mirror. Tomorrow, Marcus's world would end. Tomorrow, she would take back everything he'd stolen. Tomorrow, she would become the CEO her father had always believed she could be. She just had to make it through one more night of lies. November 14th arrived with fog rolling off San Francisco Bay, thick enough to muffle the city's usual morning chaos. Catherine sat in her home office at 9 a.m., video camera angled to show only her face and the neutral wall behind her. The navy suit felt like armor. The pearls at her throat had belonged to her grandmother, worn the day her grandfather took their first company public in 1987. History repeating itself, but this time the woman at the table wouldn't be pushed aside. Her phone buzzed. Griffin's message was brief. Board members in place. Eleanor confirmed Marcus in office. FBI contact standing by. Execute when ready. Catherine's hand drifted to her belly, feeling the weight of her daughter. 7 months along, active this morning, as if sensing the importance of what was about to happen. I'm doing this for you, Catherine thought, so you never have to make yourself small for a man who doesn't deserve you. She opened the video conferencing software and waited. Marcus arrived at the office at his usual time, 8:45, coffee in hand from the place on Market Street that knew his order without asking. Eleanor greeted him with her customary efficiency, handing him a printed schedule that looked identical to every other Friday. Board meeting at 1, she noted, quarterly review. Marcus frowned, scrolling through his phone calendar. I don't have that listed. Added it Wednesday, Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the weight of what she knew. Dr. Whitfield wanted to discuss IPO timeline adjustments before the holidays. Should only take an hour. Marcus shrugged, already dismissing it. Fine. Make sure my lunch order gets here by noon. I have calls with Singapore after the meeting. Of course, Mr. Thorne. He disappeared into his office, closing the door. Eleanor waited exactly 3 minutes before sending Catherine the confirmation text. At 12:45, Marcus's lunch arrived. Rare tuna poke bowl, extra avocado, no seaweed. He ate at his desk, reviewing the Goldman Sachs presentation deck for the 15th time. The numbers were pristine. The growth projections aggressive but defensible. 3 months from now, Aldridge Technologies would be valued at over $1 billion in its public debut. And he, Marcus Thorne, would be recognized as the architect of that success. Catherine Aldridge would be a footnote, the founder's daughter who'd inherited the company and had the good sense to hire competent management. Nobody needed to know she'd written the core algorithm that made everything else possible. Nobody needed to know her father's initial vision had laid the foundation. In Marcus's version of history, he was the hero. His phone buzzed. Vivian's name lit up the screen. He hesitated, then swiped it away. She'd been needy lately, calling at inconvenient times, hinting at wanting something more permanent. The Tahoe trip this weekend would smooth things over. He'd already booked the suite at the Ritz-Carlton, put it on the corporate card under consulting expenses. After the IPO closed, maybe he'd set her up with something more substantial. A condo in Pacific Heights, a legitimate title at the company where she could pretend to work. But right now, she was a distraction he didn't need. At 12:58, Eleanor knocked on his door. The board is assembling in the conference room, Mr. Thorne. Marcus grabbed his tablet and headed down the hall. The conference room occupied the southeast corner of the 12th floor, glass walls offering views of the bay when the fog lifted. Today it remained shrouded, the city invisible beyond the windows. 7 people sat around the table. Dr. Lauren Lawrence Whitfield, 70 and distinguished, had been Robert Aldridge's closest friend and the company's chairman since its founding. Meredith Garrison, formerly a vice president at Microsoft, brought decades of tech industry experience. Preston Blackwood represented the venture capital firm that had provided early-stage funding. The other 4 were institutional investors, faces Marcus recognized from quarterly earnings calls. Dr. Whitfield gestured to an empty chair. Marcus, thank you for joining us on short notice. Marcus settled into his seat, projecting confidence. No problem. Eleanor mentioned you wanted to discuss IPO timing before the holidays. We have more urgent matters to address. Dr. Whitfield's tone carried an edge Marcus had never heard before. The screen at the head of the table flickered to life. Catherine appeared, 7 months pregnant in a navy dress, her hair pulled back severely. Marcus's stomach dropped. What is she doing here? This is a board meeting, not... This is exactly where I should be, Marcus. Catherine's voice came through the speakers with crystalline clarity. I'm the majority shareholder and founder of this company. I have every right to address my board. Marcus looked around the table, searching for allies. Preston Blackwood wouldn't meet his eyes. Meredith Garrison was studying her notes with intense focus. Only Dr. Whitfield looked at him directly, and the expression on the old man's face made Marcus's chest tighten. Catherine, if this is about the IPO timeline, we can discuss it privately. You don't need to. I'm here to present evidence of corporate espionage, trade secret theft, and securities fraud committed by our chief financial officer. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Marcus forced a laugh. That's absurd. Catherine, you're under a lot of stress with the pregnancy. Maybe you should rest and let the professionals handle. The screen changed. Email threads appeared, enlarged so every word was visible. Marcus to Vivian. Vivian to an address at Titanium Technologies. Attachments showing client lists, pricing structures, algorithm specifications. Dates and timestamps creating an irrefutable timeline. You've been having an affair with Vivian Ashford for 8 months. Catherine's voice remained level, clinical, like she was presenting quarterly results rather than destroying her husband. You've charged $340,000 in personal expenses to corporate accounts. Hotels, jewelry, her apartment, her car, all paid for with Aldridge Technologies funds. Preston Blackwood leaned forward, studying the documents. Jesus Christ, Marcus, that's not the worst of it. Catherine advanced the presentation. You've been systematically leaking our proprietary technology to Titanium Technologies through Miss Ashford, who forwarded your emails to Dalton Pierce, their VP of Strategy. Our AI security algorithm, client acquisition costs, product roadmap, security vulnerabilities, everything that gives us competitive advantage, you handed to our biggest rival. Marcus's mind raced, trying to construct a defense. Those documents are taken out of context. Vivian is a consultant. I was getting her input on. She's a lifestyle influencer with 20,000 Instagram followers and no technical background. Catherine's interruption was surgical. You weren't getting her input. You were using her as a courier because you thought she'd be beneath suspicion. The screen changed again. Wire transfer records, bank statements, offshore account details traced through 3 shell companies. $180,000 flowing from an LLC registered to Dalton Pierce, eventually landing in an account Marcus controlled. These are kickbacks. Catherine let the words sit. Payment for the information you stole from my company. And the end goal was a hostile takeover. You were planning to depress our stock price by leaking our secrets, then have Titanium offer a rescue merger at a fraction of our actual value. You'd become CEO of the merged entity. I'd be pushed out as founder emeritus. Meredith Garrison's hands were shaking as she flipped through the printed evidence packets Eleanor had distributed. The metadata on these files, the financial forensics, the timeline, this is airtight. Marcus stood, his chair scraping against the floor. This is a setup. She's emotional, she's pregnant, she's been acting paranoid for months. She's fabricating evidence because she's afraid I'm more competent than she is. Eleanor stood from her position near the door. I can verify the authenticity of every document. I provided the files at Mrs. Aldridge's request. I witnessed Mr. Thorne printing confidential reports off system. I logged calls with Dalton Pierce that aren't on his official calendar. Everything in this presentation is accurate. Marcus spun toward her, fury replacing calculation. You went behind my back? You betrayed my trust? Eleanor's expression didn't change. I've been loyal to Aldridge Technologies for 20 years, Mr. Thorne. Not to you. There's a difference. The room seemed to tilt. Marcus gripped the edge of the table, forcing himself to think. They had evidence, but evidence could be challenged. He could hire lawyers, claim the investigation was tainted by marital conflict, argue that Catherine was using her position as majority shareholder to wage a personal vendetta. Catherine's next words shattered that hope. One more thing, Marcus. Did you know Vivian is pregnant? The screen showed a photograph of a positive pregnancy test, time-stamped 3 weeks earlier. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. She never said, she took this test 3 weeks ago. She didn't tell you because she knew you'd never leave your wife for her. Catherine's hand moved to her own belly. Ironic, isn't it? 2 women carrying your children, and you couldn't be bothered to care about either one. Preston Blackwood cleared his throat. I move for immediate termination of Marcus Thorne as CFO, effective immediately, for cause. Meredith Garrison's voice was cold. Seconded. Dr. Whitfield looked around the table. All in favor? Every hand rose. Even the institutional investors who'd praised Marcus's financial acumen at the last quarterly meeting. Even Preston, who'd told Marcus just last month that he was the best CFO in Silicon Valley. The unanimous verdict took less than 5 seconds. You can't do this. Marcus heard the desperation in his own voice and hated it. I built this company's financial infrastructure. I brought us to IPO readiness. You can't just erase that because of a domestic dispute. My father built this company, Catherine said, and for the first time her composure cracked slightly, emotion bleeding through. I rebuilt it after he died. You managed the money, Marcus, and you did it so poorly that you had to steal from us to maintain your lifestyle. You're not a builder, you're a parasite. Security appeared in the doorway. 2 men in dark suits Marcus recognized from the building's main desk. Doctor. Whitfield's voice was gentle but implacable. You have 10 minutes to collect personal items. Corporate laptop, phone, and access cards remain here. The company will be changing all passwords and security protocols as of this moment. Marcus looked at the screen where Catherine watched, her face composed again. I'll destroy you in court. I'll go to the media. I'll make sure everyone knows how unstable you are, how you're making decisions based on emotion rather than... Griffin Carlisle at Morrison & Carlisle is filing a criminal complaint with the FBI as we speak. Catherine's words were precise, each one a nail in his coffin. Trade secret theft is a federal crime. 10 years in prison, $5 million in fines. You won't have time to talk to the media. You'll be too busy with your criminal defense attorney trying to keep you out of federal prison. The room went silent except for the soft hum of the ventilation system. Marcus stood frozen, his mind unable to process the magnitude of his collapse. 30 minutes ago, he'd been planning his weekend with Vivian. Now his career was over, his marriage destroyed, his freedom threatened. Marcus, Catherine's voice drew his attention back to the screen. You could have been a partner. You could have been a father. You chose to be a thief. Goodbye. The screen went dark. Security escorted him back to his corner office. their presence a silent humiliation. Employees watched from their cubicles, words spreading through the building with the speed of corporate gossip. Marcus kept his eyes forward, refusing to show weakness, but his hands trembled as he opened his office door. The view of the bay mocked him. He'd spent 5 years staring at this view, imagining the day he'd announce his CEO promotion. He'd practiced the speech in his head during long meetings. "Thank you all for this opportunity. I promise to honor Robert Aldridge's legacy while taking this company into the future." He'd imagined Catherine in the audience, applauding politely, relegated to the background where she belonged. He packed his personal items in silence: photo frames, books, the limited edition fountain pen Catherine had given him for their 3rd anniversary. Everything else, the laptop, the company phone, the access badges that opened every door in the building, stayed behind. His personal phone buzzed, news alerts cascading down the screen. Aldridge Technologies terminates CFO amid investigation. Tech executive under federal scrutiny for trade secret theft. Silicon Valley insider trading scandal rocks pre-IPO startup. The story was already out there, carefully managed by Catherine's PR team. CFO terminated for cause. Company cooperating fully with federal authorities. No impact expected on IPO timeline. Stock price stable. Catherine Aldridge stepping into active CEO role during transition. She'd controlled the narrative before he even knew he was falling. The elevator ride down felt endless. 15 floors of descent, every ding of the numbers another level of his life stripped away. The lobby was crowded with employees returning from lunch. Conversations stopped as he passed. The security guards deposited him on the sidewalk without ceremony. Marcus stood on Market Street with a cardboard box of his belongings and $43 in his wallet. He tried to open his Uber app. Corporate credit card declined. He tried his personal American Express. The platinum card that he'd bragged had no spending limit. Transaction denied. He tried his bank debit card. Account frozen, pending investigation. The fog was lifting, revealing the city in sharp detail. People hurried past him, absorbed in their own lives, unaware that the man holding a box of office supplies had been worth millions of dollars on paper just an hour ago. His phone rang. Vivian's number. He answered without thinking. Her voice was high and frightened. "Marcus, what the hell is going on? A private investigator just called me. He said I'm being investigated for corporate espionage. He said I could be charged as an accessory. What does that mean? Where are you?" "I'm at the airport. I'm leaving, Marcus. I can't be involved in this." My lawyer said. "Your lawyer? Since when do you have a lawyer?" "Since about an hour ago when Catherine Aldridge's attorney offered me immunity if I cooperate with the federal investigation." Vivian's words tumbled out in a rush. "She knows everything, Marcus. She knows about us, about the emails, about Dalton. She knows I forwarded those documents to him. I didn't know what they were. I swear, I thought I was just helping you network. But her lawyer said if I don't testify, I'll go to prison. And I can't, Marcus. I can't go to prison for you." The sidewalk seemed to tilt beneath his feet. "You're testifying against me? I don't have a choice. She offered me immunity and money for a lawyer and a flight home to Ohio. She was actually kind about it, which somehow makes it worse. She said I was young and manipulated, and she didn't blame me. But she needs my testimony to make the criminal case stick." Marcus closed his eyes. "The baby? What about—" "The pregnancy was a false positive. I took another test this morning. It was negative. Maybe the first one was defective. Or maybe I wanted it to be real so badly that I convinced myself. It doesn't matter now. I'm going home, Marcus. Don't call me again." The line went dead. Marcus flagged a yellow cab with actual cash and gave the driver his Pacific Heights address. The ride cost $38, leaving him with 5 singles. The doorman stood at his usual post, expression neutral, but eyes knowing. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thorne." Marcus tried to push past him toward the elevator. The doorman stepped smoothly into his path. I'm sorry, sir. Mrs. Aldridge changed the locks this morning and filed a restraining order. I can't allow you upstairs. That's my home. My wife is being vindictive because of the divorce, but legally, I still have rights. The doorman produced a manila envelope. She asked me to give you this. Your personal belongings are inside. She's arranged temporary housing for you at the Courtyard Marriott on Van Ness. The reservation is under your name, paid for 2 weeks. Marcus tore open the envelope. A duffel bag had been packed with clothes, toiletries, and the divorce petition. The papers were already filed, the language clinical and devastating. Irreconcilable differences, infidelity, violation of prenuptial agreement. Catherine Aldridge retains all marital property, including primary residence, vehicles, and shared investments. Marcus Thorne entitled to personal effects only. There was a handwritten note on Catherine's stationery, her distinctive script unmistakable. Marcus, I've arranged rehab at Promises in Malibu. 90 days, fully paid. If you complete the program, we can discuss supervised visitation with our daughter. If you refuse, you'll see her in court. Choose wisely. See, he crumpled the note, fury rising to replace the numbness. She thought she could dictate the terms of his life? She thought she could take everything and then offer charity like he was some kind of project to be managed. The doorman was watching him with something like pity. Is there anything else I can help you with, sir? Marcus grabbed the duffel bag and walked away without answering. The Marriott was 12 blocks. He couldn't afford another cab. He walked, the bag growing heavier with each step, past the homes of people who had no idea their world could collapse in an afternoon. The hotel room was small, corporate, identical to 1,000 other rooms in 1,000 other cities. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and opened his phone. LinkedIn notifications showed connections removing him from their network. Twitter was alive with speculation about the Aldridge technology scandal. His personal email was filling with automated messages, subscription services requiring updated payment information, pending charges that couldn't be processed, accounts being suspended due to insufficient funds. He had $14,000 in his personal savings account, the one Catherine couldn't touch because it predated their marriage. Everything else, the joint accounts, the investment portfolios, the stock options that would have been worth millions after the IPO, frozen or claimed by Catherine under the prenuptial agreement he'd signed without reading carefully because he'd been so confident he'd always be in control. His phone buzzed. His attorney, finally returning his Friday afternoon call. Marcus grabbed it like a lifeline. Jonathan, thank God. I need you to file an emergency injunction. My wife is trying to take everything based on false allegations. She's using her position as majority shareholder to conduct a personal vendetta. Jonathan's voice was carefully neutral. Marcus, I've reviewed the complaint and supporting evidence. This is very serious. The FBI is involved. The evidence of trade secret theft appears substantial. I'm not sure I'm the right attorney for this situation. What are you saying? I'm saying you need a criminal defense lawyer, not a corporate attorney. My retainer agreement specifically excludes criminal matters. I can provide referrals, but I won't be able to represent you going forward. Marcus felt the last support beam crack. Jonathan, we've worked together for 8 years. You handled the incorporation, the venture capital rounds, all the contract negotiations. You can't just abandon me because things got complicated. Jonathan's sigh was audible. I'm not abandoning you. I'm explaining my legal and ethical limitations. The referrals I'm sending are excellent criminal defense attorneys who specialize in white-collar crime. But Marcus, you need to understand, this isn't a civil dispute where we can negotiate a settlement. If the FBI files charges, you're looking at federal prosecution. The retainers for that level of defense start at $100,000. I don't have $100,000. Everything is frozen. Then I suggest you take whatever deal Catherine is offering. The line went quiet for a moment. Marcus, off the record, she's being more generous than she has to be. Rehab instead of prison? Supervised visitation instead of no parental rights? Most people in her position would destroy you completely. If I were you, I'd take the lifeline. The call ended. Marcus sat in the generic hotel room, surrounded by the wreckage of his life, and felt something fundamental break inside him. Not regret, not yet. Just the dawning comprehension that Catherine had been 10 steps ahead of him for months, while he'd been congratulating himself on his cleverness. Catherine sat in the penthouse that evening, alone except for the life moving inside her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Her hands shook as she poured herbal tea. Her daughter kicked, sharp jabs against her ribs that felt like protests against the stress. "I'm sorry," Catherine whispered to her belly. "I'm sorry you're feeling all this. I'm sorry your father turned out to be someone we can't trust. But we're going to be okay, I promise." Her phone rang. Griffin's voice was satisfaction wrapped in professional detachment. "FBI accepted the complaint. They'll be interviewing Marcus on Monday. The press is running with our narrative. Responsible CEO protecting shareholders from rogue CFO." Stock dipped 8 after-hours trading, but recovered to only 4% down. That's remarkably stable, given the circumstances. And the divorce? Filed and served. With the prenuptial clause triggered by documented infidelity and his termination for cause, it's straightforward. He could contest it, but that would require legal fees he can't afford. Most likely he'll sign within 30 days. Catherine closed her eyes. What about Vivian? Cooperating fully, she'll testify that Marcus represented the forwarded emails as legitimate networking, that she had no knowledge of their confidential nature. Her testimony will help establish that he deliberately used her as an unwitting accomplice. She's young, scared, and smart enough to take the immunity deal. Eleanor already submitted her resignation, effective after transition period. I've prepared her severance package, generous enough to recognize her cooperation without appearing like payment for testimony. She's protected under whistleblower statutes. Catherine felt the weight of what she'd set in motion. All these lives altered because Marcus couldn't resist taking what wasn't his. And you? Are you satisfied with how this played out? Griffin's pause was thoughtful. "Mrs. Aldridge, I've been practicing law for 30 years. I've seen a lot of executives caught in scandal. Most of them fight dirty, try to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses. You built an airtight case over 8 months while 7 months pregnant and never showed your hand. That's not satisfaction I'm feeling. That's respect." After he hung up, Catherine walked through the penthouse that no longer felt like home. Marcus's presence lingered in the minimalist furniture he'd chosen, the art he'd selected, the layout he'd insisted on. She'd make changes, softer colors, family photos, a home that welcomed their daughter instead of impressing investors. She stopped in the doorway of the nursery. The cribs she and Marcus had assembled together stood ready, the yellow walls cheerful and innocent. In a few weeks, maybe less, her daughter would sleep here, would grow up in the shadow of her father's crimes, would eventually ask questions Catherine didn't know how to answer. How do you tell a child that her father chose greed over family? That he valued status more than integrity? That the man who should have protected her was the biggest threat to everything she'd inherit? Catherine's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for the hotel. Thank you for the rehab offer. I don't know if I can accept it. I don't know if I can accept that I've become someone who needs it. But thank you for not destroying me completely when you had every right to." Catherine stared at the message for a long time. She could block the number, delete it, pretend it never arrived. But something in the words, the first hint of self-awareness she'd seen from Marcus in years, made her hesitate. She typed slowly, choosing each word with care. "Our daughter deserves a father who's present and sober. If you can become that person, we'll discuss visitation. If you can't, you'll have made your choice. The offer stands for 48 hours. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The phone went into her purse, The tea went cold in her cup, and Catherine Aldridge, CEO and soon-to-be single mother, sat in her empty penthouse and wondered if winning could feel so much like losing. The board convened again on Saturday morning, an emergency session to address the leadership vacuum. Catherine appeared in person this time, walking into the conference room like she owned it, which technically she did. 7 months pregnant, but commanding the space with a presence that reminded Dr. Whitfield painfully of her father. The interim CFO candidates had been pre-screened, both from Big Four accounting firms with impeccable credentials. Catherine listened to their presentations with the same analytical focus she applied to code reviews. Numbers, projections, risk assessments. By noon, she'd made her decision, promoting the current controller to interim CFO and bringing in one of the candidates as a consultant through the IPO process. Preston Blackwood leaned back in his chair. "Catherine, I have to ask, are you sure you want to take on active CEO duties right now? You're about to have a baby. The IPO is in 3 months. That's an enormous amount of stress." Catherine met his eyes without flinching. "I built the core technology that makes this company valuable. I've been CEO in name for 6 years. The only reason I stepped back was because Marcus convinced me the board preferred a male face for investor meetings. That was my mistake. I won't make it again." Meredith Garrison spoke up, her voice warm. "For what it's worth, I think you'll be excellent. Your father would be proud." The words hit harder than Catherine expected. She'd spent 6 years trying to live up to Robert Aldridge's legacy, measuring herself against his vision, wondering if she was worthy of the company he'd built. And in trying to prove herself, she'd let Marcus diminish her until she'd almost forgotten who she was. "Thank you." Catherine's voice was steady despite the emotion threatening to surface. "I'm implementing new protocols immediately. No executive approves their own expenses. All vendor relationships must be disclosed to the board." Whistleblower protections expanded. What happened with Marcus can never happen again. The vote to confirm her as active CEO was unanimous. After the meeting adjourned, Dr. Whitfield lingered, waiting until the others had left. "Your father and I started this company in a garage in Palo Alto 32 years ago. We had nothing but an idea and determination." The old man's eyes were distant with memory. "He built something remarkable, Catherine, but he always said the real achievement was raising a daughter who could carry it forward. He died before he could see you truly take the reins. I wish he could see you now." Catherine felt tears threatening. "I wish he could have met his granddaughter. He'd have spoiled her rotten." Dr. Whitfield smiled. "Just like he spoiled you. Do you remember the summer you were 12? He bought you that first computer, the one you took apart to see how it worked? I broke it completely." Catherine laughed despite herself. "He wasn't even mad. He just bought me another one and a book on programming. He told me that was the day he knew you'd run this company someday. Not because you were his daughter, but because you had the mind for it. The curiosity, the drive." Dr. Whitfield stood, preparing to leave. "Marcus never understood that. He saw you as Robert's daughter, not as the engineer who wrote the algorithm that made all this possible. That was his fatal mistake." After he left, Catherine sat alone in the conference room, looking out at the fog-shrouded city. Somewhere out there, Marcus was in a hotel room facing the ruins of his choices. Vivian was on a flight to Ohio, trying to outrun her mistakes. Eleanor was packing up her office, loyal to the end. And Catherine was here, pregnant and alone, about to lead a billion-dollar company through the most critical phase of its existence. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's movements. "We're going to do this together," she whispered. "You and me. And someday, when you're old enough, I'll tell you the truth about your father. Not to poison you against him, but so you understand that character matters more than success. That integrity is the only currency that retains its value." The baby kicked in response, a sharp reminder that time was running out. 2 months until her due date, 3 months until the IPO. Every day between now and then, would be a test of whether Catherine could build while Marcus's empire crumbled. She stood, smoothing her dress, and walked out of the conference room toward whatever came next. Behind her, the empty table and darkened screen marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Marcus checked into Promise's treatment center in Malibu on a gray December morning, 3 weeks after Catherine destroyed his world. The facility perched on a hillside overlooking the Pacific, all tasteful architecture and expensive discretion. Celebrities came here to dry out between scandals. Tech executives came here when their boards forced interventions. Marcus came because the alternative was watching himself drink away what remained of his dignity in a budget hotel room. The intake coordinator was professionally kind, the sort of person trained not to react to anything. "Mr. Thorne, we're glad you're here. This is a voluntary 90-day program. You can leave anytime, but I encourage you to complete the full treatment. The statistics show—" Marcus cut her off. "My wife is paying for this. If I don't complete it, I don't get to meet my daughter. I understand the incentive structure." The coordinator's expression didn't change. "Then let's get you settled." His room was sparse but comfortable. Bed, desk, window with ocean views. No phone, no laptop, no connection to the outside world except supervised calls once a week. The first 3 days were physical hell. Withdrawal from alcohol manifested in shaking hands, night sweats, a headache that felt like his skull was splitting. He'd never classified himself as an alcoholic, just a social drinker who happened to drink socially every night. Sometimes alone, sometimes until he passed out, but not an alcoholic, never that. The group therapy sessions started on day 4, 20 people sitting in a circle, various stages of recovery, various levels of denial. The counselor was a woman in her 50s named Dr. Patricia Morgan, with steel gray hair and eyes that saw through every defensive mechanism Marcus tried to deploy. "Tell us why you're here, Marcus." He gave the answer he'd prepared. "My marriage fell apart. I made some poor professional decisions. I'm here to get my life back on track." Dr. Morgan let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "That's the press release version. What's the truth?" The truth was a minefield he didn't want to navigate in front of strangers. The truth was that he'd stolen from his wife's company, betrayed her trust, destroyed his career, and lost everything that mattered because he'd convinced himself he deserved more than he'd earned. "The truth is, I don't know how I got here." Dr. Morgan leaned forward slightly. "Here in this room, or here in your life?" "Both." Over the following weeks, Marcus learned things about himself he'd spent years avoiding. In individual therapy, Dr. Morgan peeled back layers of justification and rationalization until he was forced to confront the rot underneath. "When did you start seeing your wife as an obstacle rather than a partner?" Marcus thought about Catherine at 28, brilliant and grieving after her father's death, relying on him to handle the business details while she held the company together with code and determination. "I don't know. Maybe when I realized she was smarter than me." "And that threatened you?" He'd never admitted it before. "Yes. Why?" "Because I was supposed to be the one who saved the company. I was the McKinsey consultant with the Stanford MBA. She was the programmer who inherited Daddy's business. That was supposed to be the story, but it wasn't the truth. No, the truth was that she built the algorithm that made everything else possible. The truth was that without her technical vision, there'd be nothing for me to manage. The truth was that I was the supporting player in her story, and I couldn't accept that." The honesty felt like pulling broken glass from a wound, painful but necessary. Dr. Morgan didn't let him stop there. "So you made yourself the protagonist by taking what wasn't yours." Marcus closed his eyes. "I told myself I was protecting the company, that Catherine was too soft for the business world, too trusting, that I was making the hard decisions she couldn't make. But really, I just wanted to be the important one. I wanted investors to talk about Marcus Thorne, the visionary CFO, not Catherine Aldridge, the inheritor. And when that wasn't enough, I took more. Vivian made me feel powerful. The affair, the secret accounts, the deal with titanium, they all made me feel like I was in control of something. Like I was building my own empire instead of managing someone else's. At what cost? Everything. Marcus felt the words settle over him like a shroud. My marriage, my daughter, my career, my freedom, potentially. Everything I actually valued, I destroyed to chase things that were never mine to begin with. The breakthrough came in week 7. Group therapy, a session about accountability versus victimhood. Another patient was explaining how his addiction wasn't really his fault. Stressful childhood, demanding parents, genetic predisposition. Dr. Morgan stopped him gently. Those are factors, they're not excuses. You still made choices. Marcus heard himself speaking before he decided to. I keep trying to figure out when I became this person, when I went from ambitious to corrupt. Like there was a specific moment I can point to and say, that's where it went wrong. But there wasn't. It was 1,000 small choices. Every time I took credit for Catherine's work, every time I dismissed her input in meetings, every time I told her she should stay in the background while I handled the public-facing role, every lie I told myself about deserving more than I'd earned. They added up until I couldn't see the person I'd become. The room was quiet. Dr. Morgan's voice was soft. And who had you become? A thief, a liar, a man who valued status over character, someone my father would have been ashamed to know. That was the first time Marcus cried in group. Not polite tears, ugly, choking sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. The other patients let him sit with it, didn't try to comfort him or move on. Just let him feel the full weight of what he'd done. Afterward, Dr. Morgan pulled him aside. That was real honesty, Marcus. That's the foundation you build recovery on. Not positive thinking or willpower. Truth. What if the truth is that I'm not sure I can become someone better? Then you keep showing up anyway. You do the work when you don't believe it will help. You make the right choices when you don't feel like you deserve a second chance. Character isn't about feeling virtuous. It's about acting with integrity, even when it costs you everything. Catherine's world contracted as her pregnancy advanced. By January, she was working from home 3 days a week, waddling between her home office and the nursery, video conferencing into board meetings while her daughter kicked rhythmically against her ribs. Dr. Whitfield suggested she take maternity leave early. Catherine refused. The IPO preparations couldn't pause for biology. Goldman Sachs needed updated financials. The SEC required additional disclosures about the CFO transition. Investors wanted reassurance that Marcus's termination wouldn't derail the timeline. Catherine provided all of it, proving day after day that she could run the company she'd founded. Meredith Garrison became her unexpected ally. The former Microsoft executive understood tech industry sexism in ways the male board members couldn't. She started showing up at Catherine's house for working sessions, bringing lunch and treating Catherine's pregnancy as an operational detail rather than a crisis. "How are you actually doing?" Meredith asked one afternoon in late January, 8 months along, Catherine moving slowly. "Exhausted, enormous, terrified I'll go into labor during the Goldman presentation." "You won't, and if you do, I'll handle it." Meredith poured tea with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades in corporate America. "Have you heard from Marcus?" Catherine hesitated. "He's in week 10 at Promises. His counselor sends progress reports. He's apparently doing the work. Are you going to let him meet Emma?" The question Catherine had been avoiding. "I don't know. The rational part of me knows she deserves a father, but the protective part wants to keep her away from someone who proved he can't be trusted. Those aren't mutually exclusive." Meredith's voice was gentle. "You can let him be a supervised father while keeping your daughter safe. That's what the courts are for. He texted me last week. First contact since he checked into rehab. He said he's been sober 68 days and he wants to do better. Not for me, not for the company, for her." "Do you believe him?" Catherine placed a hand on her belly, feeling Emma's acrobatics. I don't know. I want to, but wanting something doesn't make it true. No, but people can change. Not always, not easily, but sometimes. Meredith met her eyes. The question is whether you can forgive him enough to let him try. Catherine's water broke on February 2nd during a video call with the Goldman Sachs team. She was explaining the company's 3-year growth projections when the contraction hit, sharp enough to steal her breath. The wetness spreading across her chair left no ambiguity about what was happening. "Gentlemen, I need to reschedule. My daughter has decided today is her birthday." She called Eleanor, who'd stayed on as a consultant through the transition. Eleanor arrived within 20 minutes, calm and efficient as ever, helping Catherine into the car with the hospital bag they'd packed 2 weeks earlier. The drive to UCSF Medical Center took 15 minutes through San Francisco traffic. The contractions were already coming every 8 minutes. "Have you called Marcus?" Eleanor asked carefully. Catherine shook her head. "This is for me and Emma. He can meet her after, if he completes rehab." The labor lasted 14 hours. Catherine had taken prenatal classes, read all the books, thought she understood what to expect. Nothing prepared her for the reality of it. The overwhelming physicality, the loss of control, the primal fear when Emma's heart rate dropped, and the doctor started using words like emergency C-section. They moved her to surgery at 11 p.m. The anesthesiologist talked her through the spinal block. The surgical team worked behind a drape while Catherine lay flat, unable to see but feeling the pressure and pull of the incision. The room smelled like antiseptic and blood. Someone was counting instruments. Catherine focused on breathing, on staying conscious, on the terrifying knowledge that her daughter's life depended on doctors she'd met an hour ago. Then Emma cried. The sound cut through Catherine's fear like light through darkness. A doctor lifted a small, bloody, perfect human into her field of vision. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, full head of dark hair, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open in outrage at being removed from her warm home. "Hi, baby girl," Catherine's voice broke. "I'm your mama. I've been waiting so long to meet you." They placed Emma on her chest for 30 seconds before taking her to be cleaned and assessed. Catherine closed her eyes, overwhelmed by love so fierce it felt like drowning. This tiny person had no idea her father was in rehab for corporate crimes. She had no idea her parents' marriage had imploded. She just knew she was alive and someone was holding her. The rest of the night blurred. Recovery room, nurses checking vitals, Eleanor appearing with flowers from the board, Dr. Whitfield sending a card that made Catherine cry. "Welcome to the world, Emma Catherine. Your grandfather would have loved you so much." At 3 a.m., alone except for Emma sleeping in her bassinet, Catherine sent Marcus a text. "Your daughter was born at 8:47 p.m. Emma Catherine Aldridge. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Healthy. Perfect. Complete your program and we'll discuss visitation." She attached a single photo, Emma's face, eyes closed, impossibly small. Marcus received the message during group therapy at Promises. His counselor had bent the rules slightly, allowing him to keep his phone on for this specific purpose. When it buzzed, he excused himself and stepped into the hallway. The photo undid him. This tiny human who shared his DNA, who existed because of choices he'd made before he'd destroyed everything. She had Catherine's nose, his chin maybe. She was asleep, peaceful, unaware that her father was a criminal who'd betrayed her mother. He stood in the hallway of a Malibu rehab facility and wept for the 3rd time since arriving. Not the performative tears of early recovery, when he'd still been trying to manipulate sympathy. These were grief and shame and a desperate hope that maybe, somehow, he could become someone worthy of meeting her. His counselor found him 20 minutes later, sitting on the floor with his phone in his hand. "My daughter was born." His voice was rough. "Emma Catherine. She's perfect. Congratulations." Dr. Morgan sat beside him, not touching but present. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified, grateful, unworthy, all of it at once. That's appropriate. Dr. Morgan's honesty had been jarring at first, but Marcus had learned to trust it. You're not entitled to be her father just because you're biologically connected. You have to earn that relationship every day. I know. Do you want to be part of her life? More than anything. Then finish this program. Do the work. Become someone she can be proud of. Not for Catherine's forgiveness, though that would be a gift. Not to rebuild your career, though that might happen. For Emma, so that when she's old enough to ask questions about her father, the answer isn't just a cautionary tale about a man who chose greed over family. Marcus returned to group therapy with new purpose. The remaining 23 days of his program became about something larger than his own recovery. Every morning, meditation. Every honest share in group. Every difficult conversation with Dr. Morgan. He was building, brick by brick, the foundation of a person his daughter might someday know. He graduated from Promises on March 15th, sober for 90 days, with a 1-year aftercare plan and a court date scheduled for the following week. The federal prosecutor had offered a plea deal. Plead guilty to 1 count of misdemeanor corporate espionage, cooperate fully in the case against Dalton Pierce and Titanium Technologies, accept 2 years probation and a $50,000 fine. No jail time, no felony conviction. Griffin Carlisle called him the day after discharge. Mr. Thorne, my client is willing to discuss supervised visitation. You'll meet at a family court facility with a mediator present. 1 hour. If you complete that meeting without incident, we'll establish a regular schedule. When? Saturday, 2 p.m. The mediator's office is in Oakland. Don't be late. Marcus spent Friday preparing like it was the most important meeting of his life, which it was. He bought clothes from Target, the best he could afford on his unemployment benefits. He got a haircut at Supercuts. He practiced what he'd say to Catherine, how he'd apologize, how he'd prove he was serious about change. Saturday morning, he attended an AA meeting in Oakland, his first outside the structured environment of Promises. The church basement was dingy, the coffee terrible, the honesty brutal and beautiful. He listened to people with decades of sobriety talk about taking it one day at a time. He introduced himself for the first time in a public setting. My name is Marcus, and I'm an alcoholic. The room responded with warmth he hadn't expected. Hi, Marcus. I've been sober 92 days. I'm meeting my daughter for the first time this afternoon. I'm terrified I'll mess it up, that I'll say the wrong thing, or she'll cry when she sees me, or my ex-wife will realize I'm not actually better, just pretending. An older man across the circle spoke up. You can't control any of that. You can only control showing up sober and doing your best. That's all any of us can do. Marcus arrived at the mediator's office 30 minutes early. The waiting room had plastic chairs and outdated magazines. He sat rigid, hands folded, watching the clock. At 1:55, the door opened and Catherine walked in. She'd lost the pregnancy weight, but gained something else, a presence he didn't remember from their marriage. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked tired and strong, and nothing like the woman he dismissed as too soft for the business world. Behind her was Eleanor, carrying a baby seat. Marcus's heart stopped. Catherine's voice was neutral. Hello, Marcus. Catherine, thank you for this. I know I don't deserve. She held up a hand. The mediator is waiting. Let's keep this about Emma. The mediation room was small, designed to be non-threatening. The mediator, a woman named Dr. Susan Chen, explained the process. You'll have 30 minutes with Emma while I observe. Catherine will remain in the room. No photos, no recording. This is about beginning to establish a relationship. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Chen gestured to Eleanor, who brought the baby seat forward. Emma Catherine Aldridge was 6 weeks old, awake and alert, her dark eyes tracking movement. She wore a yellow onesie with ducks on it. Her hair had grown in thicker, unmistakably dark like Catherine's. She was the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen. Catherine lifted Emma from the seat with practiced ease, supporting her head, murmuring soft reassurances. Then she looked at Marcus. "Have you held a baby before?" "Never." Catherine moved closer, showing him how to position his arms, how to support the head and back. Then she transferred Emma into his hold, and Marcus felt the weight of his daughter for the first time. She was warm and solid and impossibly small. Her eyes found his face, studying him with the serious intensity of infants everywhere. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face, didn't try to hide them. "Hi, Emma," his voice cracked. "I'm your dad. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you were born. I'm sorry for a lot of things, but I'm here now, and I'm going to try to be better. For you." Emma made a small sound, not quite a cry but close. Marcus looked at Catherine in panic. "She's fine, just talking." Catherine's expression was unreadable. "She does that." The 30 minutes passed too quickly. Marcus sat with Emma, talking to her softly about nothing important. The weather, the drive to Oakland, how beautiful she was. Emma fell asleep in his arms, her tiny hand curled against his chest. When Dr. Chen announced time was up, Marcus felt the loss physically. Catherine took Emma back, settling her in the carrier with efficient care. The mediator made notes, then looked up. "Mr. Thorne, you did well. I'm recommending we establish a regular visitation schedule. Every other Saturday, 1 hour, supervised for the first 6 months. If you remain sober and consistent, we can revisit unsupervised visits." Marcus looked at Catherine. "Thank you. I know actions matter more than words, but thank you." Catherine's response was measured. "I'm not doing this for you, Marcus. I'm doing it for Emma. She deserves the chance to know her father. Whether you're worthy of that is entirely up to you." They left separately. Marcus sat in his car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at his hands, remembering the weight of his daughter. He'd held 7 pounds, 3 ounces of pure potential, and for 30 minutes he'd been someone other than the man who'd betrayed his wife and stolen from her company. He'd been a father. He wanted to be that person all the time. The Aldridge Technologies IPO launched on March 29th, 3 months after Marcus's termination, 6 weeks after Emma's birth. Catherine stood on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange via video feed from San Francisco, unwilling to leave Emma for the ceremony. Behind her in the home office, Eleanor held the baby, keeping her calm during the opening bell. The stock opened at $42, jumped to $53 within an hour, and closed the first day at $58. The company's valuation topped $1.2 billion. Catherine was now, on paper, worth over $800 million. She felt Whitfield called from the exchange floor, his voice cracking with emotion. "Robert would be so proud, Catherine. You did it. You took what he started and made it into something extraordinary. We did it together." Catherine looked at the framed photo on her desk, her father at 35, standing in front of the original Aldridge Technologies garage. None of this would exist without his vision. His vision and your execution. Don't diminish what you've built. After the markets closed, Catherine took Emma from Eleanor and walked through the penthouse to the nursery. The evening light filtered through sheer curtains, painting everything gold. She settled into the rocking chair, Emma nursing contentedly, and let herself feel the magnitude of what she'd accomplished. Single mother at 34, CEO of a billion-dollar company, rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal into something stronger than before. Her father's dream realized, her daughter's future secured, and Marcus, somewhere in Oakland, working at a nonprofit consulting job for $40,000 a year, trying to earn back what he destroyed, was no longer the protagonist of this story. "You and me," she whispered to Emma, "we're going to build something honest, something that lasts. Your grandfather started it, I saved it, and someday, if you want it, it's yours. But only if you want it. You get to choose who you become. That's the gift I'm giving you. Choice." People who... I know this is her day, not mine. "Come in," You're part of her life now. Supervised visits had progressed to unsupervised weekends. Marcus had never missed one, never shown up anything less than sober and present. Emma saw him and shrieked with joy. "Dada!" She ran toward him with the unsteady gait of new walkers. Marcus caught her, lifting her up, his face transformed. "Hi, sweetheart. Happy birthday. You're so big. When did you get so big?" Catherine watched them, emotions complicated. "Marcus, I saw a reminder that the world doesn't revolve around me." Catherine dried a plate, considering him. "You've changed. I wasn't sure you could." "I wasn't either. I still go to meetings 3 times a week because I don't trust myself not to backslide. I still see my therapist. The work isn't finished. I don't know if it ever is." "Are you dating?" The question surprised her, but she was curious. "There's a woman, Alicia. She teaches 2nd grade. We met. I spent years trying to fill a hole inside me with achievement and status and other people's admiration. You built something real, something that matters." They finished cleaning in companionable silence. When Marcus prepared to leave, Catherine walked him to the door. "Thank you for being consistent with her, for showing up. I know it's not easy." "It's the easiest thing I do." Marcus's sincerity was evident. "She's the best thing I've ever been part of creating." Even though she could have she'd forgotten that message during the years with Marcus, when she'd let him convince her that business required compromise, that soft people didn't survive in the corporate world, that her father's values were quaint but outdated. But he'd been right. In the end, integrity was what saved her. The careful documentation, the refusal to act on emotion, the willingness to give Marcus consequences that matched his crimes, while offering redemption if he proved worthy. That was strength, not softness. Emma stirred, making small sounds. Catherine lifted her from the crib, settling back into the rocking chair. Emma's eyes opened, focusing on her mother's face, and she smiled, the pure, uncomplicated joy of an infant who knows she's loved. "Your grandfather built an empire from nothing." Catherine's voice was soft, meant only for Emma. "I saved it when it was threatened. And someday, if you want it, it's yours. But if you'd rather be a teacher, or an artist, or an astronaut, that's yours too. The only thing I want for you is choice. The freedom to become whoever you're meant to be, not who someone else decides you should be." Emma grabbed at Catherine's pearls, fascinated by their gleam. Catherine let her explore, feeling the weight of legacy and possibility in equal measure. Outside the window, San Francisco glittered in the twilight. Somewhere in that city, Marcus was driving back to his Oakland apartment, probably calling Alicia to tell her about the party. Somewhere, Vivian was building a different life in Ohio, hopefully wiser for her mistakes. Somewhere, people were making choices that would define their futures, choosing integrity or expedience, choosing truth or comfortable lies. Catherine had made her choice 18 months ago when she'd hired Beckett Strand instead of confronting Marcus. She'd chosen to fight with strategy rather than emotion, to rebuild rather than simply destroy, to give her daughter a father who was present and recovering rather than absent and perfect in memory. She wouldn't call it winning. The cost had been too high. A marriage she'd believed in, years of her life spent with someone who saw her as an obstacle, the necessity of building armor when she'd wanted partnership. But she'd survived. More than survived. She'd transformed pain into purpose, betrayal into the foundation of something stronger. Emma yawned, settling against Catherine's chest. Her breathing slowed, deepened, trusting absolutely in her mother's ability to keep her safe. Catherine held her daughter and watched the city lights multiply as darkness fell, marking the end of one day and the beginning of another. Tomorrow there would be board meetings and product launches and 1,000 decisions that define leadership. But tonight, there was just this: a woman and her daughter in a rocking chair, building the future one breath at a time. The empire her father started, the company she'd saved, the choice her daughter would someday make about what to build next. That, Catherine thought, was victory enough.